What is up, YouTube? This is Brandon at the Movies here, bringing guys a new movie review today. I'm reviewing Five Nights at Freddy's. This is directed by Emma Tammy, and it stars Josh Hutcherson and Matthew Lillard. It is based on the popular video game Five Nights at Freddy's, which I've never played any of them. Right before I went to the movies, or right when before I saw it, I watched a little bit of gameplay from someone else who hadn't played the games before. So it was kind of just a little bit. I didn't watch the whole thing. I got kind of the gist of that. And from what I've heard, really only one of the games has technically a storyline or whatever, in terms of that. But so going into this, I was really curious. Now I know everything has been pointed about the rating and how it looks R-rated, but it's PG-13. So getting into that, I'll say this about it. This definitely had a feeling of R-rated at times, for sure. I'm not going to deny that because it did, but it didn't bother me. Now, why doesn't this bother compare to Megan, where that I had a little more of an issue, and that because that was sold as an R-rated film, because they literally had a scene in the trailer where blood splashed right in the front of it, and when you watch that movie, that scene is gone, or you see that same exact scene except the blood is gone. And when you watch the movie, it's but in the trailer, it's the character's all bloody in the elevator. So they were selling that as a slasher, and from what I've heard, the what they added in for the unrated cut works enough for what you wanted, even if it doesn't go the full-blown route. So, but again, that was sold as a slasher film. It was going to be R-rated. The way it was, tonally, it felt like. But then it changed, obviously, after the trailer, the dance sequence. But here, I think from the standpoint, like, I felt like, since we already got kind of R-rated, we got two R-rated ones. We got the Banana Splits, and then we got the Willy's Wonderland, which it feels more like a Willy's Wonderland than Banana Splits, but they're both R-rated. Or at least I think, yeah, both are R-rated. I know our Willy's Wonderland was not rated or something like that. I forget which one it was, but I know they were both at least R-rated. So this one, I felt like, especially coming from Blumhouse, and since this was based on a video game, and especially the rating it was, and I tend to think rated T for teens are technically for the PG-13 audience, so it made sense. So absolutely, I think I could see an R-rated, and obviously the director has said there's not going to be an R-rated cut or an unrated cut. I could see an unrated cut, but I don't know. The way they said they shot it like a PG-13 film, but they do have a scene or two are in here that does, and they show you some like on the face and stuff, like some gnarly stuff. But yeah, this is a PG-13 film, but I can see some of the intensest stuff could have could have went up. But this tells the story of Mike, played by Josh Hutcherson, who is having a tough time. He has to find a job because he's trying to take care of his sister, but he's had his difficulties, and he's dealing with his aunt who's trying to take his sister away from him, while he's dealing with dreams, nightmares of what happened to his brother, his younger brother. It was before his sister was born. It seemed like, at least from watching the movie, it seemed like that. And so he decides he gets hired to be a security at Freddy's Pizza, the Chuck E. Cheese thing, instead of Chuck E. Cheese, it's Freddy. So and you see all these animatronic elements: Freddy, Chica, Foxy, and forget the other one. Forget the other one's name. Sorry, but then it starts to realize there's something going on, and then Yeah, so that's really the idea of it. And then, so what I really did like about this is the development of Josh Hutcherson's character and what he goes through throughout the film. Because I feel like knowing if this didn't have a story, because ultimately you have to have a story here to make this movie work. You have to have something there to that's not just what the video game was, because from based on the video game, it's like a you're in first person mode, or it's a little more like a strategy type of thing. I feel like, so I think you have to have a kind of a story to a degree, whether it's small or big or whatever. And it's very well in a lot of this movie, which I think for some people are going to be surprised. But I think you get enough of the animatronic stuff, but probably there was much more dramatic stuff than maybe we're expecting. And Josh Hutcherson, I think he plays it really well. You feel for him. You trying to keep his sister and dealing with all these, the trauma of losing his brother when he's younger. And it's just like but though you don't get enough at the same time. It's kind of where you get some development and you get some, but there's more because there's so much they don't really, with the parents and stuff, enough with the parent stuff. And it's just, he's really good. The little sister, I think she does a really good, I think she's good for what she's meant to play. There's a couple times where it doesn't feel as natural when I think some of the emotional stuff, or when she needs to be a little more emotional. But again, I can forgive that because I think she was really had a charisma about her that she was likable. You feel for her too, and and she obviously doesn't like her aunt either, who is one of the most unlikable people. It's the one most unlikable people in this movie. But you're just like, nope, don't like her. Which again, maybe it's a stereotypical thing for these type of films that they tend to do, and especially when it comes to someone who's not as fit. And even Josh Hutcherson's character, Mike, realizes that he's not the best fit, especially with his emotional stuff and just not being able to work constantly. That's a thing, and that's due to a situation happened with his that got out of. And honestly, it was he thought of it was one thing, and it ended up not being the case. But one of the best things about this is the animatronics. Really good. They're done by Jim Henson's Productions studio, and the animatronics are great. They look exactly, just basing it. If you saw a cover or saw these images of the video game, they're pretty much on brand, on point on here for that, and that is very important, I think, for the fans. And the lore is very interesting. Now, I don't know much about it, but from what this hits most of the lore. There might be more. I've heard some lore they changed a little bit, especially in the middle act. I think they changed a little bit, but if it was to fit the story they're telling, which I could totally understand. There's a couple of YouTubers that make a couple cameo appearances. One is the mid-credit scene, and one is, or he's both in the mid-credit and in the movie. Though it's probably not the most interesting scene in my opinion, but again, it feels like it's the humor, the completely humor side that, I could have, but again, that's more for the fans, so I'm not going to hate on that scene. Again, it just didn't, at least, or the mid-credit scene, but then it's a character that I didn't even know, with that mid-credit scene, but, there's some intense scenes that are pretty effective. But okay, before I get to that, the intensity, there's some intense scenes in here. It is fine for young children. I think this is a perfect gateway horror. Is it tame? It's mostly tame, but there are some intense stuff here that you're not expecting. There, especially there's one, and you're like, oh shit. Which again, most horror fans, we're especially the gore hounds, we tend to, see all of it, or it feels like it. You see everything, but when you see it in a PG-13 horror, you're not expecting something like that. Even if tonally it does, or some of the things you see in here fits. This could fit in an R-rated world, but again, I get why they didn't do that, and again, based on the games, they were only PG-13. I said mild blood, so it makes perfect sense that these are not a gore fest. Matthew Lillard, I think, in the time we see him, I think he's really good. He's over the top, but I think it really works here. Now, I know some people call this the worst horror film of the year. His performance was bad. Again, this movie's not perfect. I think, like I said, with the characters, there's development there, but it doesn't feel like there's enough, or maybe needed more animatronic action, more scares. I don't think it's scary. There's some intense stuff that happens, sure. And I think there's something that, and for kids, I think it can be scary, but for someone older, that it won't be that. There might be some intense scenes. I could say some of the scenes can be intense, but scary, no. But again, the animatronics can't be creepy. So again, it does have that can have that effect. I don't think they did it as much. They were much more on the dramatic element side than worrying about the complete scares. But I liked where this could go, and maybe I think they could do much more on that side throughout when you're getting sequels, because this movie did 178 or 180 million worldwide. That is it was 100, I think 132 million worldwide, 80 million at the domestic box office. That is insane. Now, from what I've heard, it's front-loaded, so it might have a big drop in the second week. But, I mean, this movie just made its budget back and more. Like, only a $20 to $25 million budget. We are getting sequels. That's pretty much a for sure thing. There's one rumor I heard. I guess some of the games are most of them are prequels and not sequels, but I would assume that they're going to do more of a sequel. They'll do sequels before they do a prequel, which I like. I'd rather see sequels than I don't, especially because with the way the story they're telling, I don't want a prequel per se. Let's go forward. But then I guess there's some things they don't tell you. But then it's good. But then again, with prequels, the problem with prequels ultimately just because you know where they're going to end, so where they're going to end up going from there. So it's just kind of always tough with that. In general, it's probably the biggest flaw of the prequels. But yeah, I think the scare factor is probably the biggest thing for some people, that it's just not scary. And look, not everything's going to scare us. Look, it's hard to be scared of things, like of horror movies, because there's so many jump scares. And this is a movie that's meant to be a jump scare style, and they don't do enough of that. And basing on some of the footage I saw from the game, I could see where it could be really fucking scary. The jump scares can really get you, and they're effective. They didn't just do enough of that. And some of the acting, and this is more particularly from the Aunt character, her performance was awful, I thought. Especially in the office where she's upset, and I'm like, no, bullshit. That is the fakest cry or being upset I ever seen. I know it's just one character. Also, I think the Vanessa character, I think the kind of love interest, I think her name was Vanessa, character. I think she was interested. I liked her. I think she was good, but I don't know. I think she was. I'm not totally sure about her character overall, just because she was so, I guess, obvious in the way that, there's something she knew about it, and they were trying to play that off. But again, when you don't have so many characters, it's hard to make that completely work as well. But I did like her enough to see her come back for a sequel. Again, and for the people who are not a fan of this, who are just more into it need to be more R-rated, I feel like, and this is coming from a slasher fan, we need to stop thinking everything should be rated R. Now, I'm saying slasher films need to be rated R. This does have a feeling of a slasher film, and I get it. With slasher films, you want them R-rated for sure. Because there's only a few, if any, the Final Girls, the one that they get trapped in a horror film. It's kind of a parody of Freddy, or it's an homage to Friday the 13th. that worked enough. Though I still think it needed an R rating, but I like that story and that concept. It worked so much more ultimately. Um, but I can't really think of any others. The first Happy Death Day, I think, works enough because it's more of a, you know, Groundhog's Day thing. So that's why I can get, and every kill is like, you know, her going back and back and back after getting killed. The second one's more sci-fi, so I don't consider that as much of a slasher because that slasher element feels like it doesn't come until the end of the movie. But overall, I think Five Nights at Freddy's definitely worth checking out, even if it's just at home. But I enjoyed my theater experience. I think it was fun. I think it knows what it's going for. It's who it's trying to get into the theaters. But I think this can be just some cheesy fun. And I just like this. I think the story with Josh Hutcherson and was interesting enough to where it didn't because I was wondering in that trailer what that was about, and the details about you know what is in the animatronics, these ghosts or whatever, and it's even more. It's a bit disturbing when you think about it, even though it doesn't. They play it off as no, they play it off as pretty as disturbing, but I just think that was that was interesting. I don't know. Again, I don't know how the games worked in that aspect. I know Matthew Lillard was the villain from the beginning. I think a lot of people knew going into the movie. I think even the reports saying he's playing the villain, so I think everyone knew. So going in, I think that's another aspect, knowing that Matthew Lillard is the villain, just from the trades and stuff like that. That is, but I think that was just going to be because there's also a nod to his tie is purple. So yeah. In the end, I think this is worth checking out. I would give this a 3.5 out of 5. I know that's pretty high, I think, for some people, but I think I really did enjoy this. I liked the main characters. I liked the animatronics. I liked some of the intensity. I just like the idea, the concept of this, and the lore from this movie intrigued me to want them to do more, and maybe I'll get involved in games. I'm not a gamer, so it's kind of hard to want to get into it. From what it seemed like, those games are kind of tedious, which I suck at those games, so that's the reason why I don't play a lot of games. Some of the acting is cheesy, mainly from some over-the-top acting from Matthew Lillard, but I think it works. While you have the Ant character, who is not so great, and then you got, you know, they might change the lore. There might be something that in the middle of the act may not work for all fans, but it fits the story. But I think it's still worth checking out. So let me know what you guys thought. This is Brandon at the Movies, or Brandon Talks the Movies. Signing off. Peace.